What happens when two fake HOA cops try to shake down a retiree, only to have his Navy SEAL son answer the door? Let's just say their plan collapsed in front of the entire neighborhood. The knock came just after sunset, sharp, heavy, and way too forceful for a friendly neighborly visit. Inside his modest brick house in Plano, Texas, Derek Coleman looked up from the recliner where he'd been watching the evening news. At 62, retirement hadn't made him restless. He liked his slow evenings, his cup of chamomile tea, and the sound of his old clock ticking in the hallway. But that knock, 3 jolting thuds, made his chest tighten. Derek lived on a quiet cul-de-sac, where door knocks usually meant a package delivery or a kid selling fundraiser candy. This was different. Whoever stood outside wasn't trying to be polite. He set his mug down and walked toward the door. Through the side window, he caught a glimpse of 2 men standing on the porch. Both wore dark jackets with the words HOA Security stitched across the chest in crooked lettering. Their hands rested on their belts, not guns, but something about their posture mimicked law enforcement. Derek frowned. HOA Security? He'd lived here only a year, but he knew the Homeowners Association didn't send security to people's doors. They mailed letters. They called. They didn't show up at sunset with badges. He cracked the door open, keeping the chain latch hooked. "Yes?" Derek asked. The taller one leaned forward, his fake badge catching the porch light. "Evening, sir. We're here on behalf of the Homeowners Association. Got some complaints about your property." Derek's stomach sank. Complaints? He kept his yard trimmed, his garage clean, his trash bins out only on Tuesdays. He was new here. Yes, but he wasn't careless. Complaints? He repeated. The shorter man stepped closer, eyes darting like he was checking the street for witnesses. "Yard violation, sir. Couple of neighbors said your fence is not up to regulation height. Also heard about excessive noise." Derek blinked. Fence height? His fence came with the house. Standard wood, the same as everyone else's. And noise? The loudest thing in his home was the old vacuum cleaner. "That doesn't make sense," Derek said slowly. "And I've never had a single letter or notice." The tall one gave a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "That's why we're here in person. Trying to handle this before it escalates. You wouldn't want a fine, would you?" Something in his tone wasn't neighborly. It was threatening. Derek felt his chest grow tighter. "I think I'll wait for a letter," he said, voice firmer this time. The shorter man let out a scoff. "That's not how this works. We're here now. Better to handle it face to face." Derek's hand lingered on the doorframe. The men weren't shouting, but their words carried weight. They were trying to push him into compliance with something that didn't exist. His mind ran through the possibilities. Maybe they were scammers, maybe worse. Then from the hallway a voice came. "Dad, who is it?" It was his son, Adrian Coleman, home for the week. Adrian had only been back in Texas a few days, visiting after finishing his last deployment overseas. Broad-shouldered, calm-eyed, Adrian was the kind of man people noticed when he walked into a room. His presence alone shifted the air. Derek turned slightly, relief flickering across his face. "Just some men from the HOA," he called back, though his tone betrayed his doubt. The taller stranger narrowed his eyes. "We don't have all night, sir. Why don't you let us in so we can go over the violations properly?" Derek's pulse spiked. Let them in? Number. Absolutely not. Every warning bell in his body was ringing. He tightened his grip on the door. "Nobody's coming inside." The men exchanged a glance. Something unsaid passed between them, like they had hoped for an easy target and weren't getting it. The shorter one shifted his weight, impatience showing in the set of his jaw. And that's when Adrian appeared in the hallway, walking toward the door. His voice was calm, but carried an edge that made Derek exhale for the first time in minutes. "What seems to be the problem here?" Adrian asked, stepping into view. The fake officers straightened at the sight of him. Adrian's build alone made them hesitate, but it was the way he carried himself, shoulders squared, gaze unwavering, that instantly changed the balance of power. Derek looked at his son, then back at the two men. Adrian stood shoulder to shoulder with his father, his frame nearly filling the doorway. His eyes flicked from one man to the other, scanning the patches on their jackets, the crooked stitching, the way the badges caught the light but didn't reflect the way real ones did. Years of training made details jump out at him instantly, things most people would miss. "You said you're with the HOA?" Adrian asked, his tone calm but sharp enough to cut through the humid night air. "That's right," the taller one answered quickly. "We're here about your father's property violations. Fence is too high, and there have been noise complaints. We can issue a fine right now unless he takes care of it." Adrian tilted his head slightly, studying them the way he used to study opponents during close-quarters drills. He noticed the taller man's stance. Feet too far apart, weight uneven. Nervous. The shorter one's hand hovered close to his jacket pocket, like he had something in there, maybe paperwork, maybe not. "My dad's lived here a year," Adrian said, voice steady. "No one's ever knocked on his door about violations. You've got paperwork? A letter? Anything official?" The shorter man shifted again. "We don't need paperwork. We handle this directly, off the books. Makes things easier for everybody." Adrian almost laughed. Off the books. The phrase alone gave away the scam. But instead of laughing, he leaned against the doorframe, casual in appearance but calculated in control. "See, that's not how HOAs work," Adrian said slowly. "They send written notices, certified mail sometimes. They don't send two guys in discount security jackets to show up at night." Derek felt tension drain from his shoulders, hearing his son take control. He had faced factory managers and union disputes in his working years, but this felt different. This felt targeted. Having Adrian here was like flipping a switch. Suddenly he wasn't cornered anymore. The taller stranger bristled. "Look, we're trying to save him trouble. Neighbors are complaining, and the board doesn't like complaints. Fines can get expensive." Adrian's gaze didn't waver. "Which neighbors?" Neither answered. The silence stretched too long, and Derek felt the truth hang in the air. The shorter man finally muttered, "Doesn't matter which ones." "The board keeps their identities private." Adrian smirked. "Yeah? Funny thing, I've dealt with real complaints before. They're always documented, always signed. You can't just throw around accusations without proof, unless, of course, you're not really who you say you are." That landed like a strike. The taller man straightened his jacket, forcing a smile. "We're trying to be professional, sir. You don't want this to get ugly." The word ugly stuck. Derek's pulse kicked up again, but Adrian didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped closer to the door, voice dropping just enough to carry weight. "You came to the wrong house if you're looking for intimidation." The shorter one scoffed, trying to keep bravado. "So what? You think you can ignore HOA regulations? You think being stubborn makes you right?" Adrian leaned forward, eyes locked. "No, I think being honest makes you right. And I think lying to my father in his own doorway makes you a coward." Silence again. The only sound was the buzz of a distant street lamp and the faint bark of a dog down the block. Derek gripped the edge of the doorframe, his heart steadying with every word his son delivered. The taller man broke the pause. "Look, we don't want to write this up. But we can if you push it. HOA fines can stack. They can put liens on houses." Adrian chuckled low in his throat. "You read that off a website, didn't you? You sound rehearsed, and you're sweating like it's July, even though it's barely 75 tonight." The shorter one shifted his feet. "We're not here to argue. We're here to enforce rules. If you don't cooperate, it won't end well." Derek's stomach flipped at the words, but Adrian raised a hand, calming his father before he could speak. His voice was firm, controlled, carrying the authority of someone who had stood in far more dangerous standoffs. "You don't scare me," Adrian said. "And you're not going to bully my dad. If you've got real paperwork, go get it. Otherwise, you're done here." The men exchanged a look, frustrated, calculating. They weren't expecting resistance. They especially weren't expecting someone who knew how to strip their act apart piece by piece. But instead of backing down, the taller one leaned in just enough to test boundaries. "Sir, refusing to cooperate can bring consequences." Adrian locked eyes with him. "So can pretending to be something you're not." The words hung like a warning bell. Derek felt it, the shift in balance. These men came expecting to pressure an old, but if Adrian thought they'd give up easily, he was wrong, because the next move from the fake officers would raise the tension higher than anyone expected. Adrian took another step into the doorway, closing the distance just enough that the two men had to shift back on their heels. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't puff his chest. He simply stood there, calm and unshaken, and that alone carried more weight than anything the men outside had tried so far. Derek glanced sideways at his son, a swell of pride rising through the nerves in his chest. He had known Adrian's military background gave him discipline, but seeing it applied here, on a suburban porch in Plano, was something different. Adrian wasn't just composed, he was in control. "So," Adrian began, his tone conversational, almost casual. "You came here tonight to talk about a fence and a noise complaint, right?" The taller man nodded quickly. "That's correct. HOA regulations." Adrian tilted his head. "Good. Then tell me something. What's the name of the HOA president?" The men hesitated. It was a simple question. Anyone representing the association would know. The shorter one cleared his throat. "That information isn't something we share at the door." Adrian smiled faintly, though his eyes stayed cold. "Funny. I asked my dad about the HOA president earlier this week. He told me. Nice woman named Brenda Walters. Lives 2 streets over. Bakes pies for the 4th of July barbecue." He let the silence hang. The fake officers stared, their blank expressions betraying the fact that they had no idea who Brenda Walters was. "You see the problem?" Adrian said softly. "You don't even know who runs the HOA you claim to represent." Derek felt a strange calmness spread through him as he watched the exchange. The anxiety that had spiked when the men arrived was being replaced by something else. Confidence. His son wasn't rattled, and that steadiness rubbed off on him. The taller man tried to recover. "Names change, boards rotate. We're here to enforce rules, not chat about pies." Adrian chuckled under his breath. "Rules? Let me tell you about rules. Rules are written down. Rules are verifiable. Rules have consequences when broken. You don't have rules. You've got a scam, and you picked the wrong house." The shorter man's jaw tightened. He stepped forward, his hand brushing the inside of his jacket pocket again. "Watch yourself, buddy. We're not here to be insulted." Adrian's eyes flicked to the pocket, then back to the man's face. He didn't move an inch. "Then maybe you shouldn't have walked up wearing dollar store badges and pretending to be law enforcement." The taller man shifted uncomfortably. He tried another angle. "Look, your dad's new here. People talk. Complaints get filed. We're the ones sent to check it out. If you make this harder, fines won't be your biggest problem." Adrian leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice so that it carried a quiet intensity. "I've dealt with real threats in places you can't imagine. Do you think 2 men with fake jackets scare me?" For the first time, Derek saw the taller one lose composure. His eyes darted toward the street, as if calculating how many neighbors might be watching. The shorter one, though, doubled down, his voice rising. "You don't want this to go further," he snapped. "You don't want to find out what happens if you keep pushing us." Adrian finally moved. Slowly, deliberately, he unlatched the chain from the door and opened it wider, stepping onto the porch. He stood in front of his father now, taking full ownership of the confrontation. "You came here because you thought my father was alone," Adrian said. "You thought you could pressure him, scare him, make him give you money or compliance. But he's not alone. And I see through everything you're trying to do." The taller one tried to speak, but Adrian cut him off with a single raised hand. "Don't. I've spent my life reading people under pressure. You're nervous. You're sweating. You don't know the names you should know. And you're stalling." The shorter man's face hardened. "You think you're clever, huh?" Adrian's expression didn't change. "No. I think I'm honest. And honesty beats whatever game you're playing right now." Derek stepped forward too, emboldened by his son's presence. "He's right. Whatever you're doing here, it ends now. You don't belong on my property." The taller man shifted, glancing at his partner. For a moment it seemed like they might back down. But then his jaw set, and he took a half step forward. "This isn't over," he muttered. The air between them thickened, heavy with unspoken threats. Derek stood just inside the doorway, his hand clutching the edge of the wall as if steadying himself. Adrian, now fully outside, placed himself squarely between his father and the two strangers. "You're making a mistake," the taller man said finally, his voice carrying a forced confidence that cracked around the edges. "We've got authority here. You can't just dismiss us." Adrian gave a half smile, the kind that never reached his eyes. "Authority? Show me. Badge numbers, HOA authorization, paperwork, anything with a seal or a signature. Go ahead. I'll wait." The shorter one's lips pressed thin. His hand drifted again toward that jacket pocket. Adrian noticed, his eyes locking onto the movement. He didn't speak right away, letting the tension of the pause make the man sweat. Then, quietly, he said, "Whatever you think you've got in there, I suggest you leave it where it is." The shorter man froze, his hand pulling back like he'd touched a burner. Derek let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "You think you can stand here and mock us?" The taller one shot back. "We're trying to handle this peacefully." "You're escalating it." Adrian's laugh was short, sharp. "Peacefully? You knock on my father's door at night, flash fake badges, throw around accusations with no proof, and then tell him there'll be consequences if he doesn't comply. That's not peaceful. That's harassment." The taller one bristled, his bravado faltering. The shorter one stepped forward instead, his voice harsher. "You don't get it. We're not asking. We're telling. Either you work with us or things get messy." Adrian's posture never shifted, but his voice cut through the dark like a blade. "Messy? I've seen messy. I've been in places where people didn't come home. And I promise you, this porch, this neighborhood, this isn't going to be one of those places." The taller man swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He glanced toward the street again, hoping maybe someone would appear to back him up. But no one came. Derek spoke for the first time since Adrian had stepped outside. His voice was firm, though his hand still trembled slightly. "You two need to leave. Now. You've made your point, whatever it was supposed to be. You're not with the HOA, and you've got no right to be here," the shorter man sneered. "You really think anyone's going to believe you over us?" Adrian took a slow step closer, forcing them back a pace without touching them. His voice dropped to that low, commanding tone he used during training exercises, the kind that froze men in place even before orders were given. "They'll believe me, because I've already memorized your faces, your build, your fake patches, even the cheap stitching on those jackets. If you're still here when I call the police, I'll describe every detail. You'll be done." The taller man's breath hitched, betraying panic. The shorter one tried to hold firm, but his eyes flicked sideways, betraying doubt. Adrian caught it immediately. "You're not partners, are you?" Adrian said, his words landing like a hammer. "One of you talked the other into this, and now you're both realizing you bit off more than you can chew." Neither man answered. The taller one shifted from foot to foot, his earlier confidence drained. Adrian pressed on. "You came here thinking you'd find an older man alone. Someone you could pressure into handing you cash or information. But that's not what you found. You found me. And I'm not leaving until you do." The shorter one broke the silence with a sharp exhale. "You don't scare us." Adrian leaned in just slightly. His eyes locked onto his. "That's fine. I don't need to scare you. I just need you to know. I see right through you. And you're not leaving with anything tonight except regret." Derek's chest swelled with relief, hearing his son's words. For years, he had taught Adrian about standing tall, about never letting anyone dictate who you are. And now, here was Adrian, embodying every lesson and then some. The taller man finally cracked. His voice came out quieter, stripped of its earlier bluster. "Let's go," he muttered to his partner. "This isn't worth it." But the shorter one shook his head, jaw tight. "Not yet. He doesn't get to talk to us like that." Adrian's eyes narrowed. His muscles tensed just enough that Derek could see it. The moment hung sharp, balanced on the edge of something that could turn physical in an instant. But before fists flew, a new sound entered the scene. The creak of a gate, footsteps on the sidewalk, and the sudden realization that someone else had just stepped outside to watch. The squeak of the gate drew every eye. Across the street, a porch light flicked on, followed by the shuffle of footsteps. Then another door opened 2 houses down. Within seconds, the quiet block wasn't so quiet anymore. Neighbors, curious about the voices carrying through the evening air, began stepping outside. Derek felt his throat loosen at the sight. He wasn't trapped with these men anymore, not completely. There were witnesses now, but Adrian didn't let his guard down. He knew attention alone didn't guarantee safety. Sometimes it made people twice as desperate. The taller stranger cursed under his breath, his bravado thinning even further. He leaned closer to his partner. "Eyes on us," he muttered, too low for anyone but Adrian to catch. Adrian did. "Yeah," he said loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. "There are eyes on you now, so maybe you want to rethink your next move?" The shorter one bristled, his pride flaring hot. "Don't think a few nosy neighbors change anything. You're still in violation. We can escalate this." Adrian took a single step forward, his boots solid against the concrete. "Escalate? Go ahead. Do it. Show everyone here exactly who you are. You think a crowd won't notice those fake badges? Those knockoff jackets? Try it." The man flinched, though he tried to cover it by puffing out his chest. His voice rose. "We don't need to prove anything to you. Your dad's the problem. We've had enough complaints to act, and we're acting." Adrian turned his head slightly toward his father without breaking eye contact with the intruders. "Dad, tell me something. Did you ever once get a letter about this fence? A call? Anything?" Derek shook his head, firm and steady. "Not one. Not a single notice." "Exactly!" Adrian's tone sharpened. "Which means you're lying. And you know it." The taller man's mask slipped completely. "You think this is a game? We can make things difficult for you. You won't be comfortable here. You won't last in this neighborhood." The words sliced deep, the kind of insinuation Derek had feared from the beginning when he first moved into the community. He felt his stomach knot. But Adrian was already stepping in, his hand rising just enough to quiet his father before Derek could let the anger spill. "You just told on yourself," Adrian said flatly. "Real HOA reps talk about fines and rules. You talk about comfort. About making someone miserable. That's not enforcement. That's harassment. That's targeting." A voice called from across the street. "Everything all right over there?" It was Mr. Gonzalez, the retired firefighter who lived with his wife 2 houses down. He stood with his arms crossed, his porch light glowing behind him. Another neighbor, a younger woman in a hoodie, stood at the curb, phone already in her hand. Adrian raised his voice so everyone could hear. "These men claim they're with the HOA, but they don't have paperwork. They don't know the president's name, and they're threatening my father in his own doorway." The shorter man swore, his eyes darting toward the growing audience. "You can't what?" Adrian cut him off. "Tell the truth? You came here thinking you could corner my father, but the truth's out, everyone can see it." The taller one tugged at his partner's sleeve. "We should go. This is getting out of hand." But the shorter one shook him off, teeth clenched. "Not until he shows some respect." Adrian finally let the steel in his voice show. "Respect? You want respect? Earn it. Don't show up with lies and expect to be treated like authority." For the first time, Adrian closed the distance fully. He stepped right up, leaving barely a foot of space. His presence loomed, unflinching. The shorter man's bravado cracked, his breathing uneven, but he still didn't move. "You've got 10 seconds, Adrian said softly, only loud enough for the 2 of them to hear. "Either walk away now, or I'll make sure this crowd watches you get escorted off this property in handcuffs. Choice is yours." The taller one's resolve finally broke. "Let's go," he said firmly, gripping his partner's arm. "Now!" The shorter one hesitated, glaring at Adrian, then at Derek, then at the small cluster of neighbors gathering closer. He finally jerked free, muttering, but Adrian wasn't convinced they were gone for good, and the look in the shorter man's eyes told him this confrontation had just taken on a darker edge. The 2 men lingered at the edge of the driveway, as though they couldn't quite decide whether to leave or to push their luck again. Their posture screamed hesitation. Their eyes darted toward the neighbors who had gathered closer, phones raised, watching every second. Adrian didn't step down from the porch. He didn't need to. His voice carried enough authority to hold the entire street's attention. "You see these jackets?" he said, pointing at the taller man's chest. "Take a good look. Crooked patches, no department seal, no barcodes, no serial numbers. That's not how real HOA security, or any security, looks." A murmur ran through the onlookers. Mr. Gonzalez squinted and nodded. "Yeah, that's fake. I worked alongside real officers. I'd know." The taller man shifted nervously, tugging at his jacket. The shorter one hissed under his breath, "Shut up!" "Don't say anything." But Adrian wasn't finished. He walked to the edge of the porch, voice steady, each word delivered like evidence in a courtroom. "And those badges?" "Tin and plastic. Not issued, not engraved. No reflection stamps, no state code. You can buy them online for $30. The woman in the hoodie raised her phone higher, recording everything. "Got it on video," she called out. The shorter man snarled. "Turn that off." "You can't record us." Adrian looked directly at him. "Yes, she can. This is a public street. You came here trying to impersonate authority. Now you're exposed." The taller man whispered again, urgency in his tone. "We need to go." But the shorter one was too far in to back out cleanly. His pride kept him rooted in place. "Don't think this little show means anything. We're still in charge here. You think a few recordings scare us?" Adrian's jaw tightened, but his voice never rose. "What scares you is the truth. And the truth is, you're frauds. You've got no documents, no authorization, no right to be here. You tried to intimidate my father in his own home. And now you're standing in front of half the neighborhood with your scam falling apart." He turned slightly, his voice directed at the crowd now. "This is how it works. They show up at dusk, make vague threats about fines or violations, and pressure homeowners into paying cash to avoid escalation. They count on people being scared, on people not knowing the rules. But all it takes is one person asking questions, and the whole act collapses." The neighbors began whispering among themselves. Mr. Gonzalez stepped forward. "I've heard of this. My buddy in Dallas said people have been pulling this stunt over there too. Pretend HOA reps, shake down older homeowners." Derek's chest tightened again, but this time with a different kind of emotion. Anger, yes, but also vindication. He wasn't crazy. He wasn't careless. He was a target. And now everyone saw it. The shorter man's face darkened, his pride unraveling in front of the crowd. "You think you're clever pointing fingers? You don't know who you're messing with." Adrian's gaze didn't flinch. "I don't need to know who you are. I know what you're not. You're not legitimate. You're not HOA. You're not authority. You're nothing but two guys with fake jackets trying to scare the wrong man." For the first time, Derek found his own voice rising. He stepped forward, his hands trembling but his tone strong. "You came to my door like bullies. You thought I'd roll over. Well, I'm done rolling over. I worked 40 years of my life to earn this home. You don't get to walk in and treat me like I don't belong." The crowd murmured again, louder now. One neighbor clapped softly. Another raised their phone higher, recording Derek's words. The tension shifted completely. The power no longer belonged to the two strangers. It belonged to Derek, to Adrian, to the street standing behind them. The taller man tugged harder at his partner's sleeve. "We're leaving." Now, but the shorter one spat at the ground, his pride too bruised to walk away clean. "This isn't over. You'll regret this." Adrian's eyes narrowed, his voice like stone. "The only thing I regret is that you thought you could get away with it. Walk away while you still can." Finally, the taller man yanked his partner toward the curb. The shorter one resisted, but with every phone pointed their way, every eye watching, the fight drained out of him. They stumbled toward a dented grey sedan parked down the street. Adrian stood rooted until he heard the car doors slam shut, and the engine cough to life. The vehicle pulled away. The grey sedan hadn't been gone more than 10 minutes before Derek noticed it again, idling half a block down with its lights dimmed. His chest tightened. "They didn't leave," he whispered. Adrian followed his father's gaze, jaw setting. The car's silhouette sat heavy against the curb, engine purring low. It was obvious to anyone paying attention. The two men weren't finished. "They're testing us," Adrian muttered, seeing if the crowd disperses, if they can sneak back when things quiet down. Some neighbors had already gone back inside, satisfied enough that the strangers had left. But a handful lingered, Mr. Gonzalez, the woman in the hoodie, and a couple standing at the end of their driveway. The street wasn't deserted, but the numbers had thinned. The sedan door cracked open. Out stepped the shorter man, the one whose pride refused to let go. He adjusted his jacket, squared his shoulders, and started walking back toward Derek's house with a swagger that screamed defiance. Adrian moved instinctively, stepping off the porch and onto the walkway. His voice carried across the lawn. "Stop right there." The man slowed but didn't halt. "What, you think you scared me off? You humiliated me in front of people. That doesn't sit right." Adrian stood firm, feet planted. "Humiliation happens when lies get dragged into the light. That's on you, not me." The man's lips curled. "You think you're tough? You think a couple of stares from nosy neighbors mean anything? They'll be back in their houses soon enough. And then it's just you, your old man, and me." Adrian's body remained loose, controlled. His tone, however, sharpened. "You come one step closer, and this whole block will see what happens when someone threatens a veteran on private property. I don't think that's the story you want spreading." The taller man, still in the car, called out nervously. "Leave it! Let's go already." But the shorter one ignored him. He was too far gone, too wrapped up in salvaging whatever scrap of ego he had left. He pointed a finger at Derek, who stood just inside the porch light. "This neighborhood doesn't want you. That fence, that house. You don't belong here." Derek's breath hitched, anger and hurt mixing in his chest. But before he could speak, Adrian cut in, voice like iron. "Say another word to my father, and you won't like the outcome." The shorter man smirked, taking one more step. "What, you gonna hit me? Gonna prove you're just as violent as you look?" Adrian didn't blink. "I don't need to hit you. I'll have the police here before you can take another step. And unlike you, I've got a neighborhood of witnesses who know exactly what you tried tonight." The woman in the hoodie raised her phone again, her voice sharp. "Already dialing. You want me to hit call?" The shorter man faltered, eyes flicking toward her. The glow of the phone screen lit her face, making the threat of exposure feel real. His bravado cracked. "You think this is over just because you got people watching?" he muttered. Adrian's voice dropped low, almost quiet. "No, it's over because you lost. You came here trying to intimidate an old man. Instead, you got caught. You showed everyone exactly who you are. And now you've got nothing left." The taller man leaned out the car window, desperation dripping from his voice. "Get in the car, man! Now!" Finally, after another tense pause, the shorter one backed up. His glare stayed locked on Adrian, but his feet betrayed him, retreating step by step toward the sedan. He yanked the passenger door open, slamming it shut behind him. The engine roared, headlights flashing bright as the car lurched forward. It sped off down the street, tires squealing as it disappeared into the night for the second, and this time, final time. Silence settled heavy on the cul-de-sac. The remaining neighbors lowered their phones. Mr. Gonzalez let out a breath. "Never seen anything like that." "You handled them better than the cops could have." Adrian exhaled slowly, tension finally leaving his shoulders. He turned back to his father. "You all right?" Derek nodded shakily. "I am now, but I don't understand why. Why target me?" Adrian placed a steady hand on his father's arm. "Because you're new, because you're older, because they thought you were easy prey. That's all predators do. They look for the ones they think won't fight back." Derek's throat tightened. "And if you hadn't been here," Adrian squeezed his shoulder, "but I was. And you're not alone." The sedan's tail lights had long vanished when the street began to breathe again. The tension lifted, but it didn't disappear. Neighbors lingered in small clusters, murmuring, replaying what they had just witnessed. The glow of porch lights spread down the block, one after another, as though everyone needed proof that the darkness hadn't swallowed them whole. Derek leaned against the porch railing, his hands still trembling. "I never thought something like this could happen here," he admitted, voice low. Adrian stayed at his side, his stance relaxed but his eyes still scanning, instinctively surveying every shadow. "It happens more than people realize," he said. "Most times the ones doing it never get caught. They move on to the next house, the next family." Mr. Gonzalez stepped closer, arms crossed, his expression firm. "Not this time. You exposed them. I've lived here 25 years, and I've never seen anyone try something that brazen." The woman in the hoodie, still holding her phone, walked up the driveway. "I've got the whole thing recorded," she said. "From when they were at your door to when they came back. Audio's clear, too. You should send this straight to the police." Adrian gave her a grateful nod. "That recording might make all the difference." "Thank you." She shrugged, but her voice was steady. "I don't like bullies. And I don't like seeing someone targeted just because they think they can get away with it." Derek swallowed hard, emotion rising. "I appreciate that. I really do." Another neighbor, a middle-aged man in a work shirt, joined the small circle. "We'll back you up. If the police come knocking, you'll have half this street vouching for what happened. You're not alone here." Those words landed heavy. Derek had worried since the day he moved in, worried about fitting in, about being accepted, about being seen as an outsider. But now, standing on his porch with neighbors pledging support, something inside him shifted. Maybe he belonged more than he thought. Adrian noticed the change in his father's face. "See, Dad? They didn't scare everybody. They exposed themselves. And now people are watching out for you." Mr. Gonzalez pulled out his phone. "I'll call the non-emergency line right now. Best to get officers here tonight while everything's fresh. If those guys have pulled this before, maybe they're already on record somewhere." Adrian agreed with a nod. "Good idea. The sooner it's documented, the harder it'll be for them to try again." As Gonzalez spoke to dispatch, Derek sank into the porch chair, his body heavy with relief. "I thought I'd left all this behind when I retired," he murmured. "Thought life would be quiet. Turns out trouble has a way of finding you, no matter how far you move." Adrian crouched next to him, his voice calm, almost gentle. "Maybe, but you don't face it the same way anymore. You don't face it alone." The sound of approaching sirens broke the quiet. Blue and red lights soon painted the street, reflecting off car hoods and windows. 2 squad cars rolled up, engines low, lights flickering. The first officer stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, with a notepad already in hand. "Evening. Got a report about suspicious individuals impersonating HOA officers?" Adrian gestured toward the cluster of neighbors. "You'll want to talk to everyone here." They saw the whole thing. "We've also got video." The woman in the hoodie stepped forward, phone raised. "I can airdrop or email it right now." The officer gave a nod of approval. "That'll help. If these guys have been running this in other neighborhoods, we'll get them off the street faster." As statements were gathered, Derek sat quietly, watching. For the first time that night, his heart slowed. He saw his neighbors giving their accounts, saw his son calmly detailing every observation, saw the police officers listening closely, taking it seriously. Mr. Gonzalez clapped Derek gently on the back. "You've got good people around you, Coleman. Don't let 2 lowlifes make you think otherwise." Derek blinked hard, his throat tightening with gratitude. "Thank you," he said softly. Adrian glanced at his father, then back to the officer. "You'll keep us updated?" "Absolutely," the officer replied. "And if they come back, call 911 immediately. Don't engage. We'll handle it." Adrian nodded, but didn't respond. He knew he'd always engage if it came to that. He couldn't help it. It was in his blood. But as the squad cars drove off with the neighbors dispersing, Adrian also knew the real battle wasn't just with those 2 men, it was with the fear they had tried to plant. And fear, if left alone, could take root even deeper than a scam. When the last cruiser rolled off and the neighbors slowly retreated into their homes, the street dimmed back to its usual quiet. Porch lights flicked out one by one until only a handful remained. Derek stayed seated on the porch chair, his hands clasped together tightly, as though if he let go the night would start up again. Adrian remained standing, arms crossed, scanning the block like he was still on patrol. Even without the immediate threat, his instincts wouldn't allow him to fully relax. "You don't have to keep watch, son," Derek said finally, voice tired but gentle. "They're gone." Adrian shook his head. "Gone for now. But men like that don't always quit. Sometimes humiliation makes them reckless. That shorter one, he's not the type to let it go easy. Derek looked at him for a moment, then lowered his eyes. I don't get it. What makes people like that think they can just come to someone's door and pretend to be something they're not? Adrian uncrossed his arms, leaning against the porch railing. Because too often it works. They knock on 10 doors, and maybe 8 people panic, hand over cash, or let them inside. That's all it takes for them to keep going. Derek let out a long breath. And I would have been one of those 8, if not for you. I could feel myself breaking. I wanted to shut the door and pretend they weren't there, but I was scared of what they might do if I did. Adrian crouched beside him, his tone steady. Dad, fear is natural. It doesn't make you weak. What matters is how you respond when fear shows up. Tonight, you didn't cave. You stood your ground when you told them they weren't coming in. That mattered. Derek swallowed hard. I only managed that because you were behind me. Adrian gave a faint smile. And I'll be behind you as long as I can. But you don't need me to be strong. You already are. You just forget it sometimes. For a long moment, father and son sat in the glow of the porch light, the weight of the night pressing heavy, yet somehow lighter than before. Then Derek asked the question that had been gnawing at him. What if they come back when you're not here? Adrian looked him square in the eyes. Then you call the police immediately, and you remember what you saw tonight. That you don't have to open the door, you don't have to engage. They feed on fear, Dad. Deny them that, and they lose. Derek nodded slowly, but his face betrayed lingering worry. Adrian noticed. Listen, he said, his voice softening. When I was deployed, I saw villages targeted by people who thought they had power. People who tried to intimidate with weapons, with lies, with fear. But every time the ones who fought back weren't the biggest or the strongest. They were the ones who refused to hand over their dignity. That's all it takes. Refusal. You did that tonight. Derek's throat tightened at his son's words. He reached up, gripping Adrian's hand. I don't say it enough, but I'm proud of you, not just because of what you did out there in the world, but because you came back, and you're still looking out for me. Adrian gave a small nod, and I'm proud of you. You raised me to stand tall. Tonight, you did the same. The words settled between them, filling the silence more than any siren or voice had earlier. Inside, the old clock chimed 10. The night had moved on, but Derek still felt the echo of the knocks at his door. He doubted that sound would leave him anytime soon. Guess I won't be sleeping much tonight, Derek admitted with a faint, weary laugh. Adrian smiled gently. That's all right. Sleep will come tomorrow. What matters is, you're safe tonight. Derek leaned back in the chair, finally releasing his grip on his hands. For the first time in hours, he let his shoulders fall, letting the air in his lungs stretch deeper. The street was calm again, but Adrian kept watch a little longer, his eyes scanning until he was satisfied no sedan lingered in the shadows. But deep down, Adrian knew the experience would leave a mark, on his father, on himself, and on every neighbor who saw it. And he also knew the lesson wasn't finished until his dad truly believed it. The night was finally still. The porch light glowed steady, casting soft halos across the yard, while inside, the old clock marked the passing minutes like a reminder that life was moving forward, no matter how shaken the last few hours had been. Derek sat with his hands resting on his knees, staring into the quiet street. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a mix of exhaustion and clarity. You know, he said slowly, I thought moving here meant peace, a fresh start. I worked all my life for this house, this little bit of calm. Tonight made me wonder if calm even exists, Adrian. Seated beside him now, leaned back, his voice level. Calm isn't about nothing ever happening. It's about knowing what to do when something does. Trouble doesn't disappear just because you cross into a new zip code, but you can decide how much power it has over you. Derek turned, studying his son's face. You didn't even flinch when they stood there, talking like they owned me. How do you stay so steady? Adrian paused before answering. Training taught me tactics. But it's not about training. It's about remembering what's real. Men like them thrive on fear. They talk fast, they throw threats, they hope people panic. But once you strip away the noise, there's nothing behind it. That's what steadiness is, knowing the difference between noise and truth. Derek absorbed the words, nodding slowly. Noise and truth, he repeated. That's a good way to put it. They sat in silence for a moment, letting the weight of the night settle. Across the street, a single porch light still glowed. Mr. Gonzalez, no doubt keeping an eye out just in case. The simple solidarity of it struck Derek harder than he expected. You know what surprised me most? Derek asked softly. The neighbors. I always worried about fitting in, about whether people here would accept me. But when those men came, they didn't hesitate. They stood with us, even recorded it, even promised to back us up. Adrian smiled faintly. People show their true colors in moments like that. Fear can divide, sure. But courage? Courage has a way of pulling people together. That's what happened tonight. You weren't just standing against those two, you had a whole street standing with you. Derek's eyes stung, though he blinked it back quickly. And I almost missed it. I was so focused on what those men were saying, I didn't see the people behind me. Adrian reached over, resting a firm hand on his father's shoulder. That's the lesson, Dad. Fear makes you look at the threat. Courage makes you look at who's standing beside you. The words hung in the cool night air, heavier than the silence, but warmer too. Derek swallowed, letting the lesson sink deep. Inside, the clock struck 11. The day was done. The trouble had passed. But what lingered wasn't fear anymore. It was something stronger. Derek turned to his son, voice firm. I won't forget this. Next time someone tries to make me feel small, I'll remember tonight. I'll remember that noise isn't truth. And I'll remember that I'm not alone. Adrian nodded, a small smile pulling at his lips. That's all I wanted you to see. The two men stood, finally ready to leave the porch behind. Derek switched off the light, the yard falling into darkness. But the weight in his chest had lifted. Inside, the house felt different. Still the same walls, same furniture, but no longer just a place he lived. Tonight, it had become a fortress, not because of bricks or locks, but because of the bond between father and son, and the unexpected strength of a community. And for anyone watching, anyone listening to this story, that's the takeaway. Fear is loud, but courage is steady. Bullies thrive when we stay quiet, but they crumble the moment we speak truth and stand together. It doesn't take military training to hold your ground. It takes remembering that you belong, that your home is yours, and that no one has the right to make you feel otherwise. So the next time someone tries to intimidate you, whether it's with words, fake authority, or outright lies, remember Derek Coleman's porch. Remember that truth is stronger than noise, and that standing tall can turn the tide, even when the odds feel stacked against you. And if you found something in this story that spoke to you, something that reminded you of your own strength or gave you a reason to stand taller tomorrow, then don't keep it to yourself. Share it, let others hear it, and subscribe so you'll never miss stories like this. Because sometimes the reminder we need most is that we are not alone.